Welcome to Flashpoints. I'm Margaret Brennan, and I'm joined here at CBS by Juan Zarate, our national security analyst in-house here. And Juan, we just heard some interesting testimony on Capitol Hill today from the head of the ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, who laid out some areas of concern, specifically Al-Qaeda. He said, actually, they're not on the path to defeat, they're franchising, they're dispersed.
Yeah, I mean, for those who follow the counterterrorism world and the threat from Al-Qaeda, this is not new, and certainly those who watch Flashpoint shouldn't be surprised. But the problem with this is it runs counter to the narrative you've heard from the White House over the period of many months that Al-Qaeda is on the path to defeat, the Al-Qaeda core is diminished in influence. The reality is this threat is morphed. It's in places like North Africa, East Africa, Yemen, Central Asia, motivating folks in Europe, North America, and obviously and clearly in Syria. And so this is a real problem for the administration because this threat still exists, it's morphed, and frankly it's more diffused and dangerous in many ways and hard to deal with. And I think Director Clapper's comments are a mere reflection of that reality.
And he highlighted one place where they found has become a magnet. Even though some of Al-Qaeda's dispersed, they're pulling into Syria in particular. And the threat of counterterrorism there, the issue of how to handle this conflict is something that has really perplexed the administration. Is Al-Qaeda getting stronger because of this vacuum in Syria?
It is. The Al-Qaeda movement itself is gaining strength and new life in the context of Syria, in part because it's a cauldron of conflict. It's where they're fighting against Assad, a known enemy, so they're attracting a lot of attention and interest. Foreign fighters from around the world, numbers, frankly, Margaret, that were not seen in Iraq or even Afghanistan, and also funding from around the world. And so you have an Al-Qaeda movement that is resurrecting itself in many ways and adapting in the context of Syria. And importantly, Margaret, last week we heard the new Secretary of Homeland Security say for the first time that Syria is now a homeland security threat. And that's the first time you've heard it put that way, but it's the reality that this has really become the fulcrum for a new kind of Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda-driven threat to the homeland.
It was really interesting to hear him connect those dots because the administration's policy has been contain and mitigate when it comes to Syria, which those who follow the region say nothing's contained. And certainly on the counterterrorism front, nothing's really been mitigated here. But you did see some internal breaks with Al-Qaeda last week. You had a split. With ISIS breaking off from al-Nusra Front and core Al-Qaeda. Explain that. How does that work?
Well, it's fascinating. As Al-Qaeda grows more diffuse, less hierarchical, it's harder to control the elements of the network. And so what you had was Ayman al-Zawahiri, who succeeded bin Laden to head Al-Qaeda itself, basically declaring that the group out of Iraq that has been competing for and fighting in Syria it should no longer be associated with Al-Qaeda, can no longer carry the banner for Al-Qaeda in Syria. Instead, it should be the local group, Jabhat al-Nusra, who can do that for Al-Qaeda. And
ISIS is bad for the brand, basically?
Bad to a certain extent for the brand, but also they're not following orders. And I think that's really what's irritated Zawahiri, who wants discipline and wants to be able to label and control what happens, in particular in Syria, because he realizes that what comes out of Syria may be the future of Al-Qaeda. And so he wants to control the brand, the banner, and who's actually fighting under it. This creates some problems for the U.S., by the way, Margaret. You've seen now reporting, something we talked about last week on Flashpoints, that U.S. authorities have trouble then defining whether or not we can go after ISIS, the group in Iraq. If they're no longer Al-Qaeda, no longer associated with the groups that attacked us on 9/11, they start to fall outside of the authorities and authorizations to go after them with lethal force, for example. And so it creates a new dynamic in terms of a group that is no longer a part of Al-Qaeda and it's excised. How do you treat them? Are they an enemy or not? And that creates a new policy conundrum for the administration.
And a lot of work for some of your former colleagues
That's
over
right.
at Treasury and the others as they try to hunt down the money. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Juan.
Margaret.
This has been Flashpoints. I'm Margaret Brennan. Thanks for watching.